So I'm Melissa. For the folks in the back, I apologize. I'm only 5 feet tall, so you may only see a bobbing head because me standing is about the same height as everyone sitting down here. And for the photographer, I hope you have one of those Barbara Walters filters on, so I look like 10 years younger and 15 pounds skinnier. So hook a girl up. So what am I going to talk about today? Oh, there we go. I'm going to talk about sales enablement. Or, as I like to call it, the herding cats methodology, because I love all you salespeople. I have been a salesperson myself. You all have the attention span of a cat. So quite often when we talk about doing enablement, it really is about herding cats. So let's jump right on into it. This is what we're going to cover. You're going to learn what sales enablement is, because quite often at an event like this, I say that I'm in enablement, and I get one of these looks. Like, what is that? So we're going to talk about what it is. We'll talk about what are the 3 key pillars of enablement that will help an organization be successful. And then we'll talk about how important enablement is to an organization. So for those of you who are individual sellers, if you don't have an organization that has an enablement function, you may want to go back to them and go, hey, maybe we should do some of this kind of stuff in our organization. Before I get into all this, I want to just tell a little story about my journey and how I got here, and it all starts quite actually similarly to Eli's story, way back. Before I've been enablement, and I've done enablement for about 10 or so years, going on 11. I've actually been a quota-carrying sales rep. So I've carried a bag, I've managed key accounts. My very first job in university was a telesales rep. So my very first summer job, I'm in university, I'm all eager. I finished my second year of engineering, and I'm like, awesome, I'm going to be a salesperson. It's great. And I joined a telesales rep at a industrial manufacturing company. So to give you an idea of what we were selling, it's things like chemical solvents and the things that blow paint onto bumpers of cars. We were selling those parts. And so I get in, it's my first job, I'm all eager, meet my manager, he sits me down, gives me a tour of the office, sits me down at my desk, and gives me a stack of brochures, because this was pre-internet. It was just a stack of brochures, stack of product brochures. He said, okay, read all of this and learn it, because that's what you're selling. And then he gave me a phone book, a manufacturer's phone book, and said, now call through it. Once you've learned all this stuff in this stack, call through this phone book, and I'm going to give you this stack of pink slips, and the pink slips are the lead forms. So once you call people, if you get a hot lead, you write it down on this pink slip, and then you walk outside and you hand it to the appropriate sales rep. And that was my summer job, and it sucked. I didn't think it was physically possible, but the job both sucked and blew at the same time, which was ironic because quite a lot of the products that we had both sucked and blew. So it kind of flew really well. So as this, and it's interesting because when you think about, if you think about your onboarding experience at companies that you've had as individual sales reps, were you in a position where the company basically just gave you a chunk of stuff to read and then told you to get on the phones and start calling people? And what's really interesting is, back in the day, this is what the funnel looked like. Before the internet, very similar to my job, it was primarily sales dominated. So for someone to buy one of those chemical solvents, they had to call me. Or if I wanted to sell that chemical solvent, I had to call them. And there was nothing preventing me from having that interaction other than just mind-numbing exhaustion. But now, CEB, and you often see this quote. If you've been to any sales event, you often see the 57% of the buyers buyers are 57% of the way through their sales cycle before they actually engage a salesperson. But this is what that actually means. What it means is, with the internet, they can do all the research without you as a salesperson, and when they actually pick up the phone and start talking to you, they already think they know what they're buying. And so for us as sellers, that kind of sucks, because we have to now get ahead of them in order to teach them stuff. So it creates this new salesperson, which I kind of call a cross between a mini marketer and a salesperson, because you're having to go out there and not only educate your buyers and be where they're learning and generate your own demand, you also have to follow them all the way throughout the sales cycle and have to close the business. So we're Tuesday at the end of the day. So in the last 2 days, who has heard from your manager the following words? How much business have you closed today? Right? You're under a constant stress to close business. But you're also having to be at the top of the funnel, doing all this sort of mini marketing to generate demand. There's a lot of burden to put on one individual without giving them any kind of training or enablement. So that is where enablement comes into play. So this is a formal definition of what sales enablement is, but essentially what it means is that there is a function, a person, a department that provides you as sellers with the process, tools, and training that you need to close more business faster. In my organization at Vision Critical, my team actually manages the entire customer experience journey. So for all of our sales reps, our customer success organization, and our partners, everybody who touches a customer, we enable them throughout that entire journey so we can build Vision Critical customers for life. But I'm just going to focus in on sales. And as an enablement organization, what I think about and what I think are key to a successful enablement organization are 3 key pillars. You can have varying degrees of each of these pillars, but really if you want a strong sales organization, you have to think about these 3 things in order to make a successful organization tick. The first is just getting people in the door. And I actually find, and I'm going to talk a bit about recruiting in a second, but I find that we don't spend enough time recruiting the right people into the organization in order to have them sell effectively. The second piece is onboarding. So getting them on board, making sure they're trained up so they know what the heck they're going to do when they actually pick up the phone and call. And then finally, ongoing. So how do you keep everyone's sales skills fresh? So let's talk about each of these one-on-one. Let's get the right cats into the organization. There's a lot of profile work that's been done by CEB. Here's an example of sort of 5 profiles of sellers that managers can look for. But even before we take a look at this, I like to think of it this way. You hire a salesperson into an organization and you expect them to perform well because they're a salesperson. So, they've been successful salespeople before, they should be able to perform. But then, and I don't know if this has ever happened to you, but a salesperson joins, they've 6 months, 9 months, and then they're gone because they could not perform. And then everyone around that's left is going, I don't understand. He did so great in the interview. Of course he did great in the interview as a salesperson. We pay you to have amazing relationships with people and sell yourself. So of course they're going to do great in the interview. But what interviews don't do is they don't suss out all of the crappy stuff that salespeople have to do that you put into place in your organizations. So all of the process work, all of the discipline, all of the things that make you unique as a company, you need to suss all of that out and whether that person is going to fit into your organization and all of the processes that you might have in place. So you can take a look at some profile behavior, but what you also need to do, one suggestion, is actually kind of figure out what are all of the nitty-gritty little process things that we need to make our sellers do that will actually make or break them in our organization. This one example is like a solid, hardcore profile assessment from CEB, where you can actually assess things like what's their propensity to be able to close business and that sort of stuff. Or you can sort of get your teams together and figure out what makes a good salesperson in our organization, and then arm your HR teams with those questions to be able to figure out whether you're bringing the right people in. Because I will say salespeople are a very expensive resource. If you bring the wrong salesperson in, it might be a great person, but if they're wrong for your business, it costs you a lot of money down the line. So that's recruiting. Let's talk about onboarding, training these cats. Onboarding, and Eli talked a little bit about this, and I want to iterate on one point he made, which is practicing. So onboarding, when you bring somebody in, you can't just give them a stack of brochures and expect them to read it and have them learn and then get the phone. So I like to think about onboarding in 3 key themes. One is having a theme. So this event has a theme. People can wrap their brains around themes. So when you bring someone into your organization, thematically approach your onboarding so that as they go through everything, they realize, oh, okay, today's theme is sales skills, or today's theme is product, or today's theme is something else. So that way they can start to really wrap their brains around what is involved in becoming a successful salesperson at the organization. Then, in addition to learning, practice. I'm so happy that Eli talked about practicing, because it is so vitally critical to the success of a salesperson. I don't get up on stage if I haven't practiced something before. I don't get in front of people if I haven't practiced something before. Sports teams don't go out onto the field and play a game if they haven't practiced a ridiculous amount of their plays beforehand. Orchestras practice before they hit the stage. So why, as salespeople, are we not practicing what we're going to say in front of the customer before we actually get in front of the customer and say it? You don't want to be in a situation where you're basically quick drawing in front of the customer and having to figure it out as you're going along. Practice with your peers. You don't necessarily have to practice with your manager, although in an onboarding program, I like to put in manager checkpoints so that you're testing against good behavior. But practice with each other. Call up a friend and practice with them. Call up Kenny and practice with him. Call me up and practice with me. I'm quite happy to practice, because the more you practice, the more it becomes muscle memory. And the other thing an onboarding program should have is actually observable behavior, so that you actually, as a manager, you see your rep doing what you expect them to do in action. And then iterate. Good programs have to iterate, otherwise you can never improve. And here's one little example of what an onboarding program could look like in your company that isn't just a stack of brochures. Thematically, week by week, this actually is an example of a previous onboarding program that we had at Vision Critical. We've gotten it down to 6 weeks now. But it can be 6 weeks, it can be 4 weeks. When I was at Oracle, it was a 12-week program. At Eloqua, it was about an 8-week program. So you can definitely iterate, and then every week builds on the other. So you should feel, as a salesperson, like you're progressing to an end goal. So at the end of each week, you feel like you've progressed to that theme, and then as each week progresses, you feel like you've accomplished something at the end that ultimately builds towards you closing business faster. All right, so we talked about getting the right cats in the door, talked about onboarding them effectively, but how about ongoing training? And really, as a salesperson, once you're onboarded and you feel comfortable in what you're doing, there are only two things you care about. What am I selling, and how do I sell it? What's on the truck, and how do I sell it effectively so I can make lots of money? And as an enablement organization, I think about things in 3 buckets as it relates. There's a lot of threes. 3 is a really great number. 3 buckets as far as what am I selling and how do I sell. There's the knowledge. So what are the actual products or services that I have available to me that I can go out there and sell to various organizations? And what are all the training around that? But then there's skills. So not everyone, when they come into an organization, has the same skill set as their peers. So are there different skills that we can train someone who's brand new to selling versus someone who's a tenured sales professional, and so that they can build better relationships? And then there's also processes and tools. So lots of great productivity tools. The Vidyard stuff, super sexy. Lots of great tools that you can enable your organizations with. You need to provide them with some training and some tools around that. And then a cadence. So I find that a lot of organizations kind of fall down on a training cadence. And the reason why cadences are important is because it provides momentum as you have an ongoing training path. So I like to put in a yearly cadence, a quarterly cadence, and then a monthly cadence. Because that way, as an organization, you know, as salespeople, you know, every month at this time, I'm going to get a little bit of training, and that's going to make me better at my job. Every quarter, we're going to do another little bit of training, and at the beginning of every year, we're going to kick things off, and we're going to get a whole bunch of training that's going to help me do my job better. And that way, there's no surprise training, there's no surprise things. You can focus on those days, you can focus on training, and then on all the other days, you can focus on closing business. And then tools. So this is a quick little sample of some of the tools that our organization at Vision Critical we use to help with being enabled in the organization. Because what we want to do is enablement, using tools should help you make your jobs a lot easier versus making you do stuff that you shouldn't need to do, or exercising a lot of futility and productivity. So we use LinkedIn Sales Navigator, which is a great tool. We use HighSpot for content management, and we use Sales Loft as well, if anyone's interested in learning about those. I'm not public, well, I guess technically I'm publicly endorsing them right now, but they're not paying me anything to endorse it. They're all just really good tools. So Vidyard's another great tool. Our marketing team uses it. making sure that you've got the right tools in your hands so that you can focus on the things that are important. So that's it for me. Hopefully now you know what the heck sales enablement is. So when I say that I run sales enablement, you don't look at me like Scooby looks at Shaggy. You know, what are some of the key things that's important for a sales enablement program so that you can go back to your organizations and go, hey, have we thought about maybe doing something like this? And then also how important it is to have enablement, because the last thing that I want, since I started doing enablement, last thing I want is to have all of you in the same situation I was in when I first started working as a sales professional, which is you get a stack of brochures, you get a phone, and that's all you get. So hopefully that was valuable to you all, and I think we got time for questions. Yeah?
2 questions.
No, you don't get to ask questions.
Mike, where's the mic? Who's got the mic? Awesome. Question here? Okay, we'll go to Paul. We'll go to Paul.
How formal should the certification process be? So that is, darn you, Paul, it's a good question. So for background, Paul and I used to work together at Eloqua. I'm not just randomly mean to people in the audience. Well, maybe I might sometimes be, but I'm not really. For him in particular, I will be not so randomly mean. How far you take certification? So I actually like certification because it gives you something. It gives you a goal. It gives you a badge, right? It shows that you've got something, that you earned something. But certifications can also be very daunting. So I like to pick and choose what's important. So if there's something that's so critical to the organization and the organization's lifeblood of revenue depends on it, we'll create a formal certification process for that. But at the end, the rep feels like I accomplished something, I got it, we give them a badge, we give them a button, something that says, yes, I did this and I accomplished something, versus having just sort of a random certification that is just for the sake of having a certification. So we pick and choose carefully.
So what are some things you can do to increase adoption when bringing on a new sales tool? Because sometimes with sales folks, everything's all, it doesn't help them get hit their quota this month.
Yep. Then it's the shiny red again. Cats, shiny red ball.
Can you repeat the question?
Yes. Oh, so how do you increase adoption for a new sales tool that comes into the organization? So the first thing you need to do is, are you bringing in the right sales tool, and do we need another sales tool? So one of the things, a lot of organizations have lots of sales tools, and they're all doing a fraction of something that's important. So one of the first things someone should do in your organization, whether it's enablement or whatever, is assess whether you got all the right tools that you need. And then the second thing is to increase adoption. I usually do a little test bed of sales reps and have a tiny little test bed start first and let them start to see the success of it. And then as Eli mentioned, actually in his presentation, sales reps learn from each other, and the best sales reps learn from each other. So have that little test bed of reps start to talk about and socialize what the tool is doing for them. And then that starts to build momentum within the organization about leveraging that tool. And then just iterating on it. So checking in with the reps, having them talk to each other, finding out, is this still valuable? Is it not valuable? Do we need to make changes to it? And then any new rep that comes in, making sure they're trained on that tool. So that way you still build momentum. Now, having said that, you're not going to get 100% adoption of any sales tool, but at least that puts you in a better position to set your reps up for success and to gain adoption across the board. Plus, public shaming never hurts either. Like, we are not above shame. We use Salesforce internally and we use Chatter. We are not above shaming people publicly on Chatter for not leveraging a platform.
Now you know how VC buys sales tools, right? Great. Thank you so much, Melissa. This was awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
Great having
me.
you. Pleasure. Thank you.